We bite on the temptation of the moment. Our minds, our bodies, and our hearts get carried away and cast our microcosmos into chaos. We call this state identification because it is characterized by a misplaced sense of identity, by mistakenly calling the impulse of the moment I. But the way down is the same as the way back up, and it is the same three brains, the mind, the body, and the heart, that are the means by which order can be restored in the microcosmos. In this tutorial, we will experiment with reversing the fall into identification. We will return to the Basilica of San Marco in Venice and examine a lesser-known episode from the Genesis creation that is instrumental in this process, that of Adam naming the animals. And we will set an exercise to name the temptation of the moment throughout as many moments of our day as possible, separating our mind from identification through naming.
We must begin with intellect. Our intellectual center is better developed or more under its own control. The emotional center is more irresponsible. So, since we have more command of our intellectual center, we have to use it until either we become more conscious or learn to use other functions more efficiently and control them better than we do now.
Movements, forms, and spatial relationships are the language of the moving center or body. Ideas and concepts are the language of the intellectual center or mind. Pictures and stories are the language of the emotional center or heart. These three brains are our organs of perception. Harnessed to the aim of acquiring self-knowledge, they each perceive different aspects of the truth about ourselves. Left unattended, however, they each produce random eyes that lull us to sleep. Thus, our cosmos is constructed so that the three brains that cast it into chaos are the same three brains that can restore it back to order. Chaos is their natural state. Order comes only with knowledge and effort. The tutorial on identification mapped how inner chaos, or identification, happens. An I from our body, the moving instinctive centers, tempts our heart and then spreads to our mind. This means that identification has degrees. All my three brains might bite on the temptation of the moment, mind, heart, and body, Adam, Eve, and serpent, or only two brains, or only one. Since we have more control over our intellectual centers or our mind, we begin untangling ourselves from the state of identification using the mind. We achieve this through naming.
And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field, and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof.
We have been approaching the Genesis story of creation as a mythological description of the creation of a cosmos. God is the master of this cosmos. He creates Adam as keeper or steward to help him maintain order and harmony. To make Adam's role official, God must empower him and set him above the rest of creation. God achieves this through having Adam name all the creatures. The San Marco mosaics capture this decisive moment, showing the newly created Adam, still naked, naming the animals, dogs, camels, horses, lions. He looks towards us as if asking our help to aid him formulate more names. To create a governing principle in our microcosmos, a steward, we will have to follow the same methods. We will have to name the elements of our inner world. This is what the second step of the pyramid, the step of self-knowledge aims at. In this respect, naming our eyes and grouping them is not just a psychological game or a journey of self-exploration. It is a practical way of separating our minds from the identification of the moment. Identification, as was explained in the previous tutorial, is a misplacement of the sense of I, a misuse of the name I. Identified, Eve looks at the temptation not as something coming from the serpent, but as something coming from herself. It is my idea, she thinks. It is I. If, at the moment of temptation, the mind would call the temptation by its proper name, then it would dissolve the misplaced sense of I with which the temptation is normally received. If I can name it, it cannot be me. If we could do this, our Eve or heart might still bite on the forbidden fruit, but our Adam or mind would refuse it.
We have no means of seeing centers, but we can observe functions. The more you observe, the more material you will have. This division of functions is very important. Control of any of our faculties can only be obtained with the help of knowledge.
I should point out, before formulating this week's exercise, that naming only separates one of the three brains from identification, and at that, the weakest brain, the mind. The heart and the body still remain identified, and since 2/3 of my being have remained identified, it is only a matter of time before my mind too will fall back asleep with them. Success in naming the temptation of the moment does not eliminate identification. It only achieves a partial and temporary separation. This is where we start. To eliminate identification, we will have to get the heart on our side, which is a different process that will be discussed in future tutorials. Last week's aim was to catch the head of the serpent, the first eye that intrudes into our efforts. This week's aim will be to name it. When I observe my body speeding up its movements, I name it haste. When I observe my mind milling over a pleasant fantasy, I name it imagination. When I observe my heart criticizing someone else's behavior, I name it judgment. And so with unnecessary talk, concern about the future, indulging in the past, and so forth, slowly learning the names of my common temptations. If I do this often enough, then my relation to my three brains begins to shift. My identity, normally rooted in the three brains, begins to withdraw. I begin observing my cosmos as God observes his. My sense of I slowly moves to its rightful place, to the Master. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey to the Master begins with separation and naming.